Have you ever walked through a place so empty, so eerily silent, that it felt like the shadows themselves were watching you? Imagine stepping into a forgotten town where the wind whispers secrets of the past, where every creaking door and shifting shadow holds a story waiting to be told. Welcome to Redemption, a town erased from history, left to decay in the grip of time. Once a thriving settlement, it now stands abandoned. Its streets cracked and lifeless, its buildings frozen in time like the remnants of a long-forgotten nightmare. Those who dare venture into redemption never return the same, if they return at all. They say at night the town breathes, that unseen figures move in the darkness, that the past refuses to die. What truly happened here? Why was redemption left to rot? And most importantly, who or what still lingers among the ruins? Join us as we uncover the terrifying secrets buried within the abandoned streets of redemption. But beware, you may not be alone as you read this. Would you dare explore a ghost town like this? Tell us in the comments. And if you love spine-chilling stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more terrifying tales. Now let's step into the darkness. The legend begins. The road to redemption was barely more than a crumbling stretch of cracked asphalt, overgrown with weeds that clawed their way through the fractures like desperate hands reaching for escape. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, a sickly shade of gray that seemed unwilling to let the sun touch this cursed place. David Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel as his SUV rattled over the uneven road. Beside him, his longtime friend and paranormal investigator, Lucas Hayes, adjusted the camera strap to his chest. In the back seat, their tech expert, Mia Sullivan, flicked through her tablet, her sharp green eyes scanning historical records of the town. "This place is a black hole," Mia muttered, her voice laced with unease. "No official records after 1983. It's like redemption just vanished." David glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "That's why we're here, to find out what really happened." The fourth member of their team, Alex Foster, let out a nervous chuckle from the passenger seat. "You sure about that? Because I've got a really bad feeling." They had all heard the rumors, how redemption was abandoned overnight, its residents gone without a trace. How travelers who wandered too close to the town reported seeing ghostly figures lurking in the windows of dilapidated buildings. How some never returned at all. Yet here they were, armed with cameras, night vision gear, and a thirst for the unknown. As they passed the crooked, rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Redemption," the temperature inside the vehicle seemed to drop. Mia shivered, rubbing her arms. The town lay before them, shrouded in silence. Buildings, once proud and sturdy, stood in various states of decay. Some had collapsed entirely, their skeletal remains jutting out like broken ribs. Others remained eerily intact, their windows hollow and staring, as if waiting for something, or someone. The wind whistled through the empty streets, carrying with it the distant sound of something scraping. David parked near what had once been a gas station. The pump handles dangled uselessly, their hoses curling like dead snakes. A faded open sign hung in the window, swaying slightly despite the still air. Lucas clicked on his camera. "All right, let's get some footage before the sun sets. No one split up, and if anything feels off, we get out." They stepped onto the cracked pavement, their footsteps sounding unnaturally loud against the oppressive silence. Mia checked her thermal scanner. Nothing so far, no heat signatures, no movement. Alex swallowed. "Yeah? Well, tell that to whatever's watching us." David followed his gaze to a second-floor window of the old Redemption Hotel. A dark silhouette stood motionless behind the grimy glass. A trick of the light? Or something else? Before he could say anything, the shape was gone. A chill ran down David's spine. They pressed forward, stepping over debris and faded remnants of a life once lived here. Discarded toys, a bicycle rusted beyond recognition, a newspaper dated October 14th, 1983, still sitting on a diner's counter. The front page headline read, "Redemption in Crisis, Mysterious Outbreak Spreads." Mia's brows furrowed. "Outbreak?" Lucas snapped a picture. "No record of an epidemic, no CDC reports, nothing." Then why was the town abandoned? Alex whispered. David had no answer. A sudden crash echoed from inside a nearby store, the sound of shattering glass breaking the fragile silence. The team froze. Something moved in the shadows beyond the broken storefront. Slow, deliberate. Lucas lifted his camera, its infrared mode flickering on. The screen displayed shifting, glitching figures, their outlines barely distinguishable from the darkness. Then the audio feed crackled with something that made their blood run cold. A voice, whispering. "Leave," Mia gasped. "Did you hear that?" Before anyone could respond, footsteps thundered toward them from inside the store. Fast, aggressive. David took a step back. "Run!" They bolted down the street, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding like war drums. Behind them, the sound of something chasing them was deafening, growing closer with every step. Then just as suddenly as it began, the footsteps stopped. They turned back. Nothing. Only empty streets and the haunting sound of the wind. But as they stood there, catching their breath, Alex pointed a trembling finger toward the storefront. Faintly, barely visible in the dim light, a set of fresh footprints led from the shattered window and stopped mere inches away from where they had just been standing. Yet there was no sign of whoever or whatever had made them. Lucas swallowed hard. "Guys, I don't think we're alone." The silence after the chase was deafening. David's heart pounded against his ribs as he stared at the footprints. They were deep, fresh, pressed into the dust of decades. Yet, nothing stood before them. No figure, no culprit. Just a chilling emptiness where someone or something should have been. Mia clutched her scanner tightly. "This doesn't make sense. No thermal readings, no biological presence." Her voice was tight, barely above a whisper. But something was just there. Lucas slowly raised his camera again, the screen flickering as it scanned the area. A grainy, distorted static crackled across the display. And then, for a split second, the image sharpened. A figure, tall, thin, watching them from the shadows of the ruined store. But before he could react, the camera glitched violently, the image fragmenting into a mess of red and black pixels. A high-pitched whine screeched through the microphone. Lucas winced, yanking off his headset. Alex was already backing away. "We need to get the hell out of here." David turned in a slow circle, scanning their surroundings. The buildings seemed to loom closer now, their windows like soulless eyes watching their every move. Then, a whisper, faint, raspy, just behind him. "You shouldn't have come." His breath hitched. He spun around, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Nothing, but the whisper had been right there, right behind him. Mia inhaled sharply. "We're being hunted." Lucas switched his camera to night vision. The screen flared green as it adjusted to the gloom. "Everyone, stay close. No one moves alone." They pressed on, moving carefully down the main street. The wind had picked up now, whistling through the hollow buildings, rattling broken windows. Alex pointed toward an old church at the end of the road. Its wooden doors hung askew, the bell tower leaning slightly to one side, as though bowing under the weight of unseen forces. "Maybe we can take shelter in there," he suggested. David hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to stay away from that place, but the open streets felt even more vulnerable. "All right," he nodded. "Let's move." They reached the entrance, stepping onto the rotting wooden porch. The moment David touched the handle, a deep thud sounded from within. Everyone froze. Then, another thud, like heavy footsteps dragging across the floor. Mia clenched her jaw. "Something's inside." Lucas adjusted his grip on his camera. "We came here for answers, didn't we?" Gritting his teeth, David pushed the door open. The interior was just as decayed as the rest of the town. Pews were overturned, dust thick in the air. A single chandelier hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly despite the absence of any wind. The stained glass windows had long since shattered, jagged remnants jutting from their frames like teeth. And at the far end of the church, near the altar, a figure stood in the shadows. David's breath hitched. The figure was tall and motionless, draped in what looked like a tattered black cloak. Its face was obscured, hidden beneath a deep hood. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, the figure twitched. A low, wet gurgle bubbled from its throat. David instinctively stepped back. Lucas lifted his camera, hands shaking. The screen flickered. The image wavered, and then the figure snapped its head toward them. Its face wasn't human. A gaping maw, stretched unnaturally wide, a black void where eyes should have been. Its skin was cracked, gray, seeping. And then, without warning, it lunged. Mia screamed. David grabbed Alex, yanking him backward as the creature's elongated arms slammed into the floorboards where they had just been standing. The wood splintered under the force. Lucas stumbled, catching the moment on film. The image was a blur of black red and teeth. "Run!" David shouted. They bolted for the door, Alex nearly tripping in his panic. The thing let out a hideous, gurgling shriek behind them, the sound rattling in their bones. Mia shoved the doors open, daylight spilling in as they tumbled outside. David turned just in time to see the figure stop at the threshold of the church. It didn't follow them. Instead, it stood there, watching. A slow, unnatural smile spread across its gaping mouth. And then, it spoke. A voice deep and guttural, echoing with something far older than the town itself. "You belong to redemption now." The doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. The team stood frozen, their breaths ragged. Lucas clutched his camera, staring at the screen in disbelief. "Tell me you all heard that." David wiped cold sweat from his brow. "We need to get back to the car. Now." They turned, sprinting back toward the SUV. The street felt different now. The buildings, closer. The sky, darker. And then, the SUV was gone. The place where they had parked it was empty. Only a set of drag marks in the dust remained. Mia's voice was barely a whisper. "No! No! No! No!" A slow clicking sound echoed from the rooftops. Lucas aimed his camera upward. Dozens of figures stood on the edges of the buildings, their silhouettes motionless, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Watching, waiting. David's blood ran cold. "We're trapped." A single voice rose above the wind. A whisper. A warning. "You should never have come to redemption." The wind turned sharp, biting into their skin like icy needles. The figures remained perfectly still, statues against the darkening sky. But their presence bore down on the team like the weight of an impending avalanche. David's thoughts were racing. The SUV hadn't just disappeared, it had been taken. And judging by the deep, gouging drag marks in the earth, whatever had done it wasn't subtle. "What the hell are they?" Alex whispered, his voice trembling as he stared up at the shadowy silhouettes. Mia stepped forward, tablet in hand, trying to scan one of the figures. The screen glitched violently, then froze, displaying a garbled message that seemed written in no known language. Symbols, shapes, wrong. The clicking sound intensified, echoing through the buildings like the ticking of countless insect legs. David clenched his fists. "We can't just stand here. We need shelter, somewhere defensible." Lucas gestured to a nearby building, a two-story structure with a faded sign that read, "Fleming General Store." Its front windows were mostly intact, its frame still holding strong. "Let's move." They ran as the clicking followed, closer now. Behind them, the silhouettes began to descend, not walking, but crawling, impossibly fast on all fours down the vertical faces of buildings. They crashed through the store doors, slamming them shut and bracing them with shelves and metal rods. Mia flicked on her flashlight, illuminating shelves still lined with dust-covered goods. Canned food, shattered jars, old boxes of cereal. Lucas aimed his camera at the boarded-up windows, trying to peer through the cracks. I think they stopped. For now, a scraping sound moved along the outside walls. Something long and sharp dragging against wood. "Tell me this place has a back exit," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. David moved quickly, flashlight sweeping the room. "There's a stairwell, Second floor might have an access point. They climbed the creaking steps, boots pressing into years of dust. Upstairs, the air was heavier, staler. A hallway stretched before them, lined with doors half hanging from their hinges. They picked the nearest room and huddled inside. I don't think these things are human, Mia said, voice shaking. They're not ghosts either. They're something else, something ancient. Lucas rewound the footage on his camera, eyes scanning every frame. When he reached the part inside the church, he paused it on the creature's face. Up close, it was worse than any of them remembered. A misshapen skull with deep, empty sockets. Its mouth wasn't just wide. It was cracked open unnaturally, exposing rows of blackened, splintered teeth. From its chest hung what looked like the remnants of a priest's collar, stitched into its flesh. Mia looked up. Do you think it used to be human? David shook his head. Whatever happened in Redemption changed everything. A sudden bang echoed through the store below. Then another. Something was trying to break in. David rushed to the top of the stairs. Down below, the barricade trembled under the weight of repeated impacts. A low, guttural growl followed each hit. And then, a voice. Let us see you. The words were slurred, wet, like they were being spoken through a throat full of blood. Lucas pulled out a small vial from his bag. Holy water. This might help if these things are demonic, Mia scoffed. And what if they're not? The crashing downstairs ceased. Silence reigned. And then, thump, thump, thump. Something began moving upstairs, inside the hallway. David turned slowly. There, at the end of the corridor, a figure stood. Not like the ones outside. This one was a little girl. She wore a dirtied white dress, her black hair matted to her face. In her hand, she clutched a broken music box, its tune wheezing out in slow, distorted notes. She looked up at them with hollow eyes and smiled. David stepped forward instinctively. Hey, are you? The girl twitched violently, her limbs jerking like a marionette, her mouth gaping wide open. Don't look at her! Mia screamed, covering her eyes. But it was too late. Alex met the girl's gaze. His body locked up instantly. He dropped to his knees, hands clawing at his own throat. No, no! David shouted, rushing to him. Alex's eyes had turned completely white, his lips moving silently as if repeating something again and again. Lucas dragged him back while Mia shut the door to the hallway. The girl's laughter echoed like a broken record. They barricaded the room, placing an old dresser against the door. David looked at Alex, who was now curled into a ball, whispering the same word over and over. Redemption, redemption, redemption. Lucas shook his head. She did something to him. I've seen this in older cases, psychic manipulation, hallucinations. But this is beyond that. Mia looked sick. I think we're starting to see what happened to the people who lived here. They didn't leave. They were changed. A whisper crept through the room like smoke. Join us. Suddenly, the walls of the room shivered. The paint peeled itself back in slow, curling layers. The wooden floorboards began to rot right under their feet, as if time itself were unraveling. David grabbed Mia's hand and pulled her to the center of the room. This place is alive. Lucas turned to the window. We've got to move, now. Using a chair, he smashed open the window. The street below loomed, dark and hungry. They began lowering Alex through first, tying bed sheets into a rope. Just as Mia was halfway out the window, a hand, gray, clawed, rotting, burst through the ceiling and grabbed her hair. She screamed. David leapt forward, grabbing her wrists. I've got you! Don't let go! The thing in the ceiling hissed, its mouth leaking black ichor, eyes wide and lidless. Lucas pulled out the vial and threw it. The holy water exploded on impact, causing the creature to recoil with an inhuman shriek. David yanked Mia down, and they both fell onto the dirt below. They were outside again, breathing, alive. But behind them, from every alley, every doorway, every shattered window, the town watched. Its eyes were endless. And redemption was just getting started. The night had swallowed the sky whole. Not a single star pierced through the inky blackness overhead. The air in Redemption had thickened, moist, heavy, humming with an unnatural static that buzzed just beneath the skin. It wasn't just dark now. It felt like they were inside something living. David stumbled to his feet, helping Mia up. Her hands trembled, blood from her scalp trickling down the side of her face where the creature had grabbed her. Lucas followed behind, dragging Alex, who still hadn't spoken a full sentence. He just kept mumbling, "She saw me. She saw me. She saw me." The main street looked different now. The buildings seemed to lean forward, like they were eavesdropping. The shadows had depth, shifting and twitching, even without light to cast them. David scanned the empty road. "We need shelter again, a place they don't expect us to go." Lucas pointed to the edge of the town. There was a cemetery behind the church. "I saw it through the back window before we ran." Mia shot him a look. "You want to go to the graveyard?" He nodded. "They're hunting us in the open. But if the dead don't rise, maybe the dead don't allow trespassers either. Maybe that's our one chance." David looked at Alex, shaking, pale, completely hollowed out, and clenched his fists. "Then we go. Stay quiet. Stay low." They moved fast, ducking through alleys and weaving around broken-down cars that hadn't run in 40 years. The sound of whispers followed them at every turn, sometimes in English, sometimes in other languages, or something far worse. As they reached the edge of town, the cemetery came into view through an iron gate twisted like melted wax. Moss-covered headstones jutted out from the soil like crooked teeth. The gate creaked open on its own. Lucas whispered, "That's either a welcome or a warning." They stepped inside. The air changed instantly, cooler, quieter. The oppressive force that had clung to them since entering Redemption lifted slightly. No whispers, no movement. It was the first peace they'd felt since arriving. David gently lowered Alex near a tree. "We'll rest here, just for a moment." Mia opened her tablet again, searching through Old Town blueprints. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. The cemetery was built on top of an old mining tunnel. Redemption was originally a mining town before the church took over everything. Lucas frowned. "A tunnel?" "Yeah, sealed off when the mine collapsed back in the 50s. "Could that tunnel lead out of town?" David asked. "Possibly, if it's not caved in." They exchanged a look. Hope. But hope was dangerous in Redemption. Suddenly, Alex stopped mumbling. He sat upright, his body rigid. And then, in a child's voice, he said, "They're watching us. Even here." The team froze. David stepped toward him. "Alex?" Alex's eyes rolled back. He grinned, a wide, unnatural grin. He wasn't in control. A voice erupted from his mouth, layered and wrong. "You think the dead rest here? Fools. They never left." The ground trembled, and then the graves began to open. The earth split and cracked. Dirt spilled like blood from wounds as arms burst free, fingers gnarled and broken. Half-rotted corpses dragged themselves into the moonless dark, moaning not in pain, but in hunger. Lucas backed away. "It's a trap. They drew us here." David hoisted Alex over his shoulder, and they ran, dodging between gravestones as the dead rose, howling with voices that didn't belong to them. One of the corpses locked eyes with Mia. Its face was hers, same green eyes, same scar on the brow. "Mia, join us!" it rasped. She screamed and kicked it away, tears streaking the people who lived here. They didn't leave. They were changed. A whisper crept through the room like smoke. "Join us!" Suddenly, the walls of the room shivered. The paint peeled itself back in slow, curling layers. The wooden floorboards began to rot right under their feet, as if time itself were unraveling. David grabbed Mia's hand and pulled her to the center of the room. "This place is alive." Lucas turned to the window. "We've got to move, now." Using a chair, he smashed open the window. The street below loomed, dark and hungry. They began lowering Alex through first, tying bed sheets into a rope. Just as Mia was halfway out the window, a hand, gray, clawed, rotting, burst through the ceiling and grabbed her hair. She screamed. David leapt forward, grabbing her wrists. "I've got you! Don't let go!" The thing in the ceiling hissed, its mouth leaking black ichor, eyes wide and lidless. Lucas pulled out the vial and threw it. The holy water exploded on impact, causing the creature to recoil with an inhuman shriek. David yanked Mia down, and they both fell onto the dirt below. They were outside again, breathing, alive. But behind them, from every alley, every doorway, every shattered window, the town watched. Its eyes were endless, and redemption was just getting started. The night had swallowed the sky whole. Not a single star pierced through the inky blackness overhead. The air in redemption had thickened, moist, heavy, humming with an unnatural static that buzzed just beneath the skin. It wasn't just dark now. It felt like they were inside something living. David stumbled to his feet, helping Mia up. Her hands trembled, blood from her scalp trickling down the side of her face where the creature had grabbed her. Lucas followed behind, dragging Alex, who still hadn't spoken a full sentence. He just kept mumbling, "She saw me. She saw me. She saw me." The main street looked different now. The buildings seemed to lean forward, like they were eavesdropping. The shadows had depth, shifting and twitching, even without light to cast them. David scanned the empty road. "We need shelter again, a place they don't expect us to go." Lucas pointed to the edge of the town. There was a cemetery behind the church. "I saw it through the back window before we ran." Mia shot him a look. "You want to go to the graveyard?" He nodded. "They're hunting us in the open. But if the dead don't rise, maybe the dead don't allow trespassers either. Maybe that's our one chance." David looked at Alex, shaking, pale, completely hollowed out, and clenched his fists. "Then we go. Stay quiet. Stay low." They moved fast, ducking through alleys and weaving around broken-down cars that hadn't run in 40 years. The sound of whispers followed them at every turn, sometimes in English, sometimes in other languages, or something far worse. As they reached the edge of town, the cemetery came into view through an iron gate twisted like melted wax. Moss-covered headstones jutted out from the soil like crooked teeth. The gate creaked open on its own. Lucas whispered, "That's either a welcome or a warning." They stepped inside. The air changed instantly, cooler, quieter. The oppressive force that had clung to them since entering redemption lifted slightly. No whispers, no movement. It was the first peace they'd felt since arriving. David gently lowered Alex near a tree. "We'll rest here, just for a moment." Mia opened her tablet again, searching through old town blueprints. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "The cemetery was built on top of an old mining tunnel. Redemption was originally a mining town before the church took over everything." Lucas frowned. "A tunnel?" "Yeah, sealed off when the mine collapsed back in the 50s. "Could that tunnel lead out of town?" David asked. "Possibly, if it's not caved in." They exchanged a look. Hope. But hope was dangerous in redemption. Suddenly, Alex stopped mumbling. He sat upright, his body rigid, and then, in a child's voice, he said, "They're watching us." Even here. The team froze. David stepped toward him. "Alex?" Alex's eyes rolled back. He grinned. A wide, unnatural grin. He wasn't in control. A voice erupted from his mouth, layered and wrong. "You think the dead rest here? Fools! They never left!" The ground trembled, and then the graves began to open. The earth split and cracked. Dirt spilled like blood from wounds as arms burst free, fingers gnarled and broken. Half-rotted corpses dragged themselves into the moonless dark, moaning not in pain but in hunger. Lucas backed away. "It's a trap. They drew us here." David hoisted Alex over his shoulder, and they ran, dodging between gravestones as the dead rose, howling with voices that didn't belong to them. One of the corpses locked eyes with Mia. Its face was hers. Same green eyes, same scar on the brow. "Mia, join us!" it rasped. She screamed and kicked it away, tears streaking her dirt-covered face. David found a half-buried hatch near a crumbling mausoleum. He threw it open, the tunnel. Cold air gushed out like a breath from the bowels of the earth. "Hurry!" he shouted. Lucas and Mia scrambled down the rusted metal ladder. David followed last, pulling the hatch closed just as one of the dead grabbed at his ankle. Its nails sliced through his boot and into his flesh, but he shook it off, slamming the hatch shut. Darkness swallowed them again. But down here there were no whispers, only breathing, and the distant sound of water dripping. They lit their flashlights. The tunnel stretched deep into the mountain, the walls lined with decaying support beams and rusted mining gear. "This place is ancient," Lucas muttered, shining his light on old carvings in the stone. Symbols, spirals, eyes. Mia studied them. These aren't just minor markings. These are rituals, warnings. A deep groan echoed through the tunnel. From behind them, something was coming. Lucas aimed his camera toward the sound. The screen showed nothing at first, just blackness. Then two red dots, moving fast. David turned. "Run!" They sprinted deeper into the tunnel, their lights flickering, the sound of the creature getting louder with each second. Its breathing was wet, like lungs filled with tar. A fork in the tunnel, left or right. No time. David took the left, bad choice. The tunnel opened into a chamber, lit only by a strange pale blue glow emanating from veins of crystal in the walls. In the center stood a statue, a horned figure with 6 arms, each holding something different. A skull, a chalice, a knife, a clock, a child's doll, and a church bell. Mia froze. "I know this from the archives. This is the Red Father. He was worshipped in the old mining cults. They said he could twist the souls of the dead." Lucas muttered, "I think he still does." Suddenly the air grew thick again, and from the far side of the chamber, a door opened. But not a normal door. A door made of flesh, pulsing, breathing. Inside, something moved. Something with teeth that didn't belong in a living world. David turned around to flee, but the tunnel behind them had collapsed. They were trapped. And the Red Father was waking up. The fleshy door breathed with each second, swelling, contracting, emitting a low, gurgling noise that made their stomachs turn. A pulse of warm, rancid air escaped from its seams, filling the chamber with the stench of rot and copper. David pressed Alex tighter against his chest. The man hadn't stirred since the graveyard, but something about this place made his fingers twitch involuntarily. Lucas raised his camera, though his hands trembled. "Whatever's behind that door, it knows we're here." The statue of the Red Father glared over them all, its 6 stone arms quivering ever so slightly now. The air around it warped subtly, like heat rising off asphalt. But there was no warmth here, only cold ancient malevolence. Mia stepped forward, drawn to the carvings surrounding the statue. These symbols, their binding runes, seals. This place was meant to hold something in, not worship it. David gritted his teeth. Well, if they sealed it, they damn sure didn't do a great job. Suddenly a wet cracking sound echoed through the chamber. The fleshy door split open. Inside was not a hallway, not another chamber. It was something else entirely. An abyss of flesh and bone, pulsating with veins that lit up like fireflies in erratic patterns. From the center, a tall, skeletal figure began to emerge, cloaked in strips of skin stitched together. It had no face, only a mouth, a vertical slit that stretched from its scalp to its navel. And as it walked forward on limbs that bent wrong, it spoke in a chorus of voices. Men, women, children, all screaming and whispering in unison. "The harvest begins anew." David backed up, placing himself between the creature and his team. Lucas dropped his camera in pure terror as the lens cracked spontaneously. Mia began muttering prayers under her breath, fumbling through her satchel for anything. Her silver crucifix, her last vial of holy water, even salt. The creature tilted its head, focusing on her. "Mia," she froze. "Do you remember your sister?" it asked, using her dead sister's voice. Mia gasped, heart lurching in her chest. "That's not possible. She's here. We all are." The being stepped forward, leaving burning footprints in the stone floor. David threw the last of their salt in a wide circle around them, creating a makeshift barrier. The creature hissed when its foot hit the edge of the line, recoiling slightly. Mia finally found her lighter and flicked it on. She pulled a torn page from her notebook, a ritual she'd copied from an old grimoire. "Cover me," she shouted. Lucas picked up a rusted pickaxe from the corner, stepping beside David. The creature howled, a sound like glass shattering in water, and lunged at the barrier. The salt burned it, but it didn't stop. The flesh on its body peeled back, revealing more faces underneath, screaming, crying, laughed. Mia recited the incantation with shaking hands, flames catching the page. The room pulsed. The Red Father's statue screamed, a high-pitched note that drilled into their skulls. Stone shattered. The chamber began to collapse. The creature flailed, screaming in a dozen voices, trying to reach Mia. It slammed against the barrier again, and then it was sucked back into the doorway, howling as the fleshy portal sealed itself, jerking closed like a living wound. Everything went still. The statue crumbled to dust, and then silence. Only their ragged breathing remained. David dropped to his knees, clutching Alex, who had begun muttering again. His eyes fluttered open for the first time in hours. "David?" David blinked. "You're back?" "I saw them," Alex whispered. "I saw them all. Redemption is alive. It's feeding off us. But there's more. A root. A source." Lucas exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "That wasn't the end?" "No," Alex said. "That thing was a guardian, a gatekeeper. There's a place deeper still, where the Red Father really sleeps. We disturbed its dream." Mia helped him sit up. "Then we need to find that root. End this." Behind the collapsed tunnel wall, a faint humming sound began to rise. Mechanical, rhythmic. A door David hadn't noticed before swung open in the far wall, revealing an ancient mining elevator. Its cage rusted but intact. Lucas grabbed the remaining flashlight. "If this is going deeper, we need to go, before this place rearranges itself again." They entered the elevator, the door clanging shut behind them. The descent began with a harsh jolt, then dropped fast. The walls around the shaft were covered in handprints, hundreds, maybe thousands, scorched into the stone like permanent shadows. Alex stared at them. "Those are the miners. They tried to escape, but redemption doesn't let anyone go." Suddenly, the elevator slowed, then stopped. The door creaked open into a new level. This was no longer just a mine. The walls were smoother, polished. Symbols glowed faintly, pulsating with life. Veins of black crystal jutted out from the stone like diseased roots. And in the distance, a heartbeat, slow, heavy. Thump, thump. They stepped out. At the end of the corridor stood a massive, iron door with chains embedded in the walls, carved with a single terrible phrase: "He who walks beneath." The air was heavier than ever now, and behind the door something stirred. They weren't alone anymore. They never had been. The iron door towered above them, stretching nearly to the ceiling of the cavernous corridor. Chains as thick as a man's arm snaked across its surface, etched with symbols that glowed a deep crimson, as if blood had been poured into their grooves. Every few seconds the metal vibrated, responding to the heartbeat that thudded behind it, slow, deliberate, and alive. Mia couldn't take her eyes off the runes. These symbols, they're not just containment, they're feeding it. Every soul trapped in redemption gives it strength. Lucas leaned in, squinting at the carvings. "You're saying these people weren't just killed, they were sacrificed?" "Yes," she replied, "and we're walking straight into the altar." David stepped forward, Alex leaning against him. "Then we finish it. We find the root, we cut it out." From behind them, the elevator's gears screamed, and with a violent shriek, the lift shot back up into the shaft, abandoning them. A final severing of the world above. They were trapped again. "Then there's only one way out," Lucas said grimly, nodding toward the door. Through. Suddenly the chains on the door snapped taut, like something inside had lunged toward them. The stone beneath their feet shook, cracks spreading outward like veins. David raised his flashlight, and for a split second, saw something move behind the cracks in the wall. A face pressed against the stone, mouth open, screaming, "Gone." "Okay," Mia said, stepping back. Nope. We're not going in there until we know what's waiting on the other side." "We don't have a choice," Alex muttered, his voice dry and distant. "We've been chosen. That's why we could cross into redemption. The town wanted us here. Then let's give it something it didn't expect," David said, gripping the wheel on the door. "An ending." He turned it. The metal groaned. Chains slithered back like snakes retreating from fire. With a loud boom, the door unlocked and cracked open, releasing a gust of wind that smelled like burnt hair and mold. And then they entered. The chamber beyond wasn't stone, it was bone, an enormous cathedral carved entirely from skeletal remains. Skulls served as bricks, ribs arched overhead like Gothic beams. The floor was a patchwork of fused vertebrae, and somewhere deep in the center, surrounded by black candlelight and red smoke, stood a massive cocoon suspended by sinewy tendons. It pulsed with the heartbeat. Thump, David whispered. This is it. The Red Father still sleeping. Lucas raised his camera slowly, already trembling. But as he looked through the lens, he saw none of it, only blackness, static, until for a blink, he saw the cocoon split open, and inside a city that looked exactly like redemption. But it was moving, breathing, alive. I think it's not just a god, it's the town itself, he said, lowering the camera. Redemption was never abandoned. It's just dormant, waiting to be born through this thing. Mia pulled out a series of notes from her bag, hastily scribbled pages she'd pieced together from church archives and folklore. There's a way to sever it, a blood offering, but it can't be a sacrifice. It has to be willing. David turned sharply. What do you mean willing? She didn't answer right away, because the cocoon began to crack. A long, wet split opened vertically, and a single enormous eye rolled forward, locking onto the group. The air turned acidic, and a deafening scream echoed through their bones, not their ear. Lucas dropped to his knees, nose bleeding. It's in my head. I can't think. David lunged and pressed his hands to Lucas's temples. Focus. Don't let it in. But the Red Father had awakened. Tendrils burst from the cocoon, some solid, others vaporous, and lashed toward them. One grazed Alex's arm, and in an instant his body convulsed. His pupils dilated, and his voice twisted. He began speaking backward. Don't listen, Mia screamed. It's trying to rewrite. David pulled him back, tossing a flare toward the tendril. It ignited and recoiled, hissing in pain. We can hurt it, he growled. We're not powerless. Mia flipped through her pages, mumbling an incantation. We have one shot at this. If we can bind it long enough, we can sever its anchor to the town. Suddenly the chamber floor split open, in a circle around the cocoon, revealing an abyss beneath within it. Moving shapes, faces, crying out for help, others laughing maniacally. Forever the soul pit, Alex gasped, regaining clarity. That's where they all are. Every resident, every visitor, they're all part of it. Mia raised the crucifix and shouted words in a dead language. The runes on the cocoon flared, and the tendrils froze just for a moment. It was enough. David grabbed a jagged shard of black crystal from the wall and drove it into the nearest rune, causing a shockwave to ripple through the room. A beam of crimson light erupted from the cocoon, striking the ceiling, and above, for the first time they saw stars again. But it wasn't over. The cocoon began to writhe violently. The eyes snapped back shut. The tendrils pulled inward. The cathedral of bone began to collapse. Run! David shouted, grabbing Alex and Mia, as Lucas led the way back toward the corridor. As they sprinted, the walls breathed, trying to hold them back. Fingers extended from the walls like tumors, grabbing, clawing. Lucas screamed as one wrapped around his ankle, pulling him down. David spun and hacked at it, with the crystal until it let go. They burst through the iron door just as the cathedral behind them imploded, the cocoon letting out one final shriek that cracked the cavern floor. They lay there gasping, bleeding,
shaking, and for a moment, nothing followed them. But far ahead, deeper down the corridor, something clicked. Another door, another heartbeat, another secret. Redemption was far from finished. The corridor behind them smoldered with ashen smoke, the remnants of the collapsing bone cathedral, curling up like dying whispers. The heartbeat that had haunted them began to diminish, no longer thunderous, but far from silent. It beat still somewhere lower, deeper, as though the very foundations of redemption held veins that pulsed with cursed life. Alex wiped blood from his mouth and sat upright, the strain of what had possessed him still clinging to his voice. That wasn't the heart. That was a lung, a breathing chamber. The Red Father hasn't been born yet. David turned sharply. You're telling me we just nearly got killed by a partial organ? Mia stood slowly, her knees shaking. That cocoon wasn't the source. It was just part of the body. The town itself is the creature. The cathedral was a nest, now destroyed. But if the body's still alive, Lucas finished her sentence grimly, we're walking through its arteries. The corridor ahead was long and slanted downward, as though inviting them into a womb of madness. As they descended, the walls gradually shifted in texture, from cracked stone to pulsing, organic sinew. Red light seeped from behind the membrane-like surfaces, veins twitching, carrying glowing ether. Mia placed a hand against the wall and recoiled. It's absorbing everything. Memory, lives, even time. This place exists. Outside logic now. Suddenly the corridor twisted, not just physically, but perceptually. One moment it was straight. The next, they were spiraling down a helix that shouldn't have been walkable. Gravity twisted. Colors bent. They weren't walking into redemption. Redemption was becoming them. David's flashlight flickered violently, then died. Lucas tapped his camera light, but the screen only showed static and flickers of faces. Some human, some disfigured beyond comprehension. We need to stay together, David said, gripping Alex's wrist. They moved forward carefully, until the hallway opened into another chamber. This one was impossibly vast. The ceiling wasn't visible, neither was the floor, only narrow skeletal bridges suspended over voids, filled with writhing shadows. The walls, if they could be called that, pulsed with chants in a dozen languages, each whispering names, names of the missing, names of the dead. And then the bridge keeper arrived, a towering creature, gaunt and hooded in black, drifted over the center path. Its head was adorned with a halo of rusted nails, and its fingers extended into razors. No face, only a hole where its eyes should be, like someone had drilled out its soul. It opened its mouth, and the voice that came forth belonged to David's mother. Turn back, child. David froze. That's not. She's dead. She's dead. Are you sure? The creature hissed. Or did you leave her behind? Just like your father. David clutched his chest. No, I didn't. The others surrounded him. Alex grabbed his shoulder. Don't listen. It's not real. But the keeper leaned closer. Everything here is real. We are memory. We are regret. We are everything you failed to bury. Lucas raised his flashlight. Get out of his head. The beam struck the keeper, who exploded into hundreds of screaming crows, black feathers slashing the air like blades. One grazed Mia's cheek, leaving a deep gash. Blood splattered across her shirt. She stumbled but didn't fall. The flock spiraled into the ceiling, and silence followed. The bridge was empty again, but something had changed. Behind them the corridor sealed, folding in on itself like crumpled skin. Ahead, the bridge split in two paths. One led into light, the other into unmoving blackness. David stepped toward the darker one, Wait, Mia said. You sure? Yes, he replied. Because if I were hiding a god, I wouldn't put it where the light still exists. They moved forward. The dark enveloped them completely, and with every step, they lost their own shadows. As they progressed, their memories started to bleed into the environment. Mia's childhood home appeared briefly in the tunnel wall. Lucas saw the train station where his brother disappeared. David saw the inside of a coffin, lid slowly closing, with his name carved on the wood. They blinked, and it was gone. Alex gasped. It's feeding again. These aren't hallucinations. These are real pieces of us. It's devouring identity. The tunnel expanded. Now they were inside what resembled a heart chamber, a domed room, with walls that pulsed with red light and echoed with distant crying, the same sobbing over and over again, like a broken record on a loop. In the center was a platform, and on it, a cradle. Mia approached, hands trembling. Inside the cradle lay a massive black sea-mew, twitching, malformed, a baby barely formed, yet radiating power like the core of a star. It looked at her, with no eyes, just awareness. I think this is the Red Father's seed, she whispered. Not him, but what he'll become, what he'll be born into. Lucas stumbled backward. What if this thing grows, becomes 1,000 towns like redemption? David stepped up. Then we end it. Before it wakes. Suddenly the room began to pulse faster. A rhythmic chime like a siren underwater echoed through the walls. The mass in the cradle grew slightly, veins extending toward the floor. The Red Father was coming. David unsheathed the bone knife Mia had pulled from the cathedral. The walls screamed. Not a sound, actual screaming. Thousands of voices, male, female, children, all crying out in terror and rage. From the corners of the chamber, creatures began to crawl, skinless, eyeless, birthed from the very walls. They hissed as they came, limbs twitching violently, black spit dribbling from their mouths. Protect the cradle, Alex said. His voice didn't sound like his anymore. Alex, Mia said. He turned to her, but his eyes were completely black. He is near. The seed twitched. The room turned crimson. The battle was about to begin, and nothing would be the same after.
The heart chamber trembled as the creatures advanced, grotesque reflections of humanity, their flesh melting and reforming with every twitch. The red glow intensified, turning the very air into a suffocating fog of heat and rot. The cradle, once still, began to rise on a pillar of sinew, the seed inside it pulsing with rhythmic, monstrous life. Mia clutched the ancient texts tighter, her lips whispering counter-incantations. She wasn't entirely sure she believed. Lucas spun in place, camera hanging from his neck as his flashlight danced across walls now slick with crawling limbs and gibbering mouths. David stood in front of the cradle, bone blade in hand, the ground beneath his boots bleeding. Alex, now fully overtaken by whatever consciousness lived inside the seed, stood with arms wide, eyes pure black and smile stretched into a rictus of religious devotion. He comes not as a destroyer, he chanted, but as a correction. Suddenly, time fractured. David saw three versions of himself simultaneously, one where he ran, one where he died, and one where he drove the knife into his own chest. The world around them convulsed. The cradle split open. The Red Father was born. It wasn't a body. It was all of them, twisting pieces of every soul redemption had ever claimed. A massive, churning mass of eyes, teeth, bone and smoke reaching the ceiling, peeling back the walls of reality as easily as one tears paper. The chamber cracked like glass, revealing the true shape of redemption. Not a town, but a cosmic womb, suspended in an infinite void. Mia screamed as her voice was sucked into the thing's form, her breath becoming a string of memories sucked from her mouth and absorbed into its form. Lucas dropped to his knees. It's rewriting us. No, David said, eyes burning with defiance. Not yet. He lunged at the Red Father,
bone blade glinting with runes that burned white. With every step he felt his past disintegrate, his mother's smile, his childhood dog, even his name. But he pushed forward, leaping onto the edge of the cradle. The red father's form surged. A massive limb of teeth and tendons shot toward him. But Mia, bloodied, teeth gritted, raised the ancient book and screamed an incantation that turned the air to glass. The limb shattered. The creature shrieked and David plunged the knife into the seed's core. Silence. Then an implosion of light. Redemption howled. The town came undone. Streets twisted into vines of ash. The buildings shattered in reverse, exploding into dust before they were ever built. The cavern beneath the church collapsed into itself. The faces in the walls melted, weeping until their eyes no longer existed. David opened his eyes in white silence. He stood in the middle of what looked like the town square, but it was different. No buildings, no sky, just fog and stillness. Mia sat beside him, clutching the remnants of the book. Lucas stood, blinking as if waking from a long fever. "We're back." "No," David said. "Not quite. It's gone. The town, the Red Father, all of it." "But where are we?" Mia whispered. Then behind them a familiar sound, the clang of a bell. They turned. The church bell tower stood alone in the mist, perfectly intact, and the door beneath it was open. Inside, Alex stood, whole, human again, smiling. "I told you," he said softly. He wasn't the end, he was just the beginning. The mist thickened, and the bell rang again. This time they heard footsteps, not from redemption, but from something else. Something arriving. The end. If this story gave you chills, made your skin crawl, or kept your eyes locked to the screen, let us know in the comments below. What do you think redemption really was? Do you think this kind of evil can ever truly be erased? Or does it just wait for the right souls to knock again? Like, subscribe, and share this terrifying tale with fellow horror lovers. And stay tuned for more stories just like this. There's always another ghost town waiting. And next time, it might be your street.